Good. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Good. How was lunch? Good. Did anybody catch me over there with the cheesecakes going? You know, if my 16-year-old daughter caught me doing that, she'd have me on TikTok in 5 minutes, you know. I got black, I got white, what you want? It's great to be with you. Welcome back for the afternoon session. It's a push towards the end and push towards the goal line, literally. We'll be on the goal line on the blue field shortly. But first, we've got to get through some great content. So for those of you I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, my name is Staten Hammock, and I have a wonderful team of people who work on the Global Relationship Management team. I lead that team. And what we do is a competitive differentiator. There's not a single competitor in our industry that has a team like the GRM team. And I'll talk a little bit more about them when I start the presentation. But first of all, 3 things you need to know about me. One is I'm from the East Coast, grew up there. Moved my wife and 2 daughters to Seattle about 7 years ago, and I love Seattle very much. I love the Pacific Northwest, and Boise is now my favorite getaway place in the Pacific Northwest. The second thing you might want to know about me is that when I was a rising lawyer, I had a moonlighting job as a certified personal trainer. So I was a personal trainer for 7 years, and as a result of that, I still work out every day. I'm kind of a workout fiend. That's really important. Even when I'm on the road, I have my gear with me. I got to get to the gym or I'm going to go crazy. The third thing about me that many of you know, but some of you don't, is that as a hobby, I DJ. So I love house music, hip hop, trap, all the contemporary dance music that you can hear in the nightclubs today. I love that stuff. In my basement, I have a whole DJ setup with lighting. There's dance parties in my neighborhood all the time. I'm behind the decks. And if you want to catch some of my mixes, go to djstaten.rocks. That's spelled S-T-A-T-N. And you can download some of my music. If you want to talk about music at the break, that's me. Okay? So let's get started on this topic. Which I think some of you may be unfamiliar with. You're familiar with law enforcement agencies, but you might not realize the level of relationships that we have with law enforcement agencies around the globe and how we leverage that to take down domain names, websites, all kinds of nefarious content to protect your online presence and do this in a way that sometimes circumvents some of the other processes that aren't as successful. So we've heard yesterday the whack-a-mole metaphor. It reared its ugly head again. And all of you know that the whack-a-mole game is a carnival game. And carnival games are designed with rules to make it very difficult to win. And if you do win, it costs you a lot of money to win. If you want that big stuffed animal of Winnie the Pooh, you're going to have to spend a lot of dollar bills at that game in order to get that. But most often than not, you lose. That's what carnival games are designed to do. So the only way to win at whack-a-mole is to change the rules of the game. And that's what the GRM monitor does, or GRM team does, okay? We try to change the rules of the game. Instead of playing whack-a-mole with one hammer, we're going to play with a bunch. This is what we do. We leverage hundreds of relationships in lots of different organizations, trade associations, law enforcement agencies, governments, law firms, regulatory bodies, policy-making companies, marketplaces, social media platforms. We have close relationships with all of these groups so we can wield the hammer that they have against the problem that everybody in this room is facing. So this is kind of a similar graphic to what Chris presented in the opening of the forum when he emphasized that one of the goals of Mark Monitor is to leverage all of these different parts of an ecosystem to protect the online presence of our companies, of our clients. So we're going to talk about one at the top, the law enforcement agencies that we work with. Okay, so years ago, Mark Monitor started to become involved in law enforcement operations around the globe where we can submit information about nefarious websites to them and let the law enforcement agencies take down the websites. So normally on a regular routine daily basis, our brand analysts are enforcing using the processes that we put in place. But sometimes, for whatever reasons, the marketplaces or the platforms are resistant to taking down counterfeit websites or pirated content or such other bad activity that we're trying to eliminate that affects consumer trust and the credibility of the internet. But sometimes we can go right to the law enforcement agencies and say, there's some bad stuff out there. Can you help us out? And they're happy to see our data and get this information to help them do what our taxpayer dollars are meant to do, which is take down the bad guys. So we're going to go through a few of the law enforcement operations that we're involved in, and most importantly, you can be involved in, because when I say we're involved, that means you. So at the end of this presentation, I'll give you sort of the tips and tricks and what you need to do to contact your CSM and get in these operations when the windows of opportunity open up so that you can submit sites and information to the law enforcement agencies directly to see if you can get some relief in tackling the bad guys. So we'll go through these operations quickly, but just to list them in order of boring operation name to more interesting one. Operation Sanction, Operation Creative, Operation In Our Sights, Operation Chargewell, Operation Ashiko, Operation Pangea, Operation Aphrodite. I think all operations should be named after Greek goddesses. It seems like that's a kind of cool thing. And then the IPR Center operations, which participates in many of those activities too, and ones that Nancy mentioned in the first session. So let me tell you a little bit about some of these that might pique your interest. So the City of London Police Intellectual Property Crimes Unit, you're going to see they do a hell of a lot of work taking down counterfeit goods. And one of their operations is Operation Sanction. And this is for like the smaller bit counterfeiters out there. This is actually an offline operation where if we can give them the right information, they'll go knock on doors and tell these folks, stop doing this stuff. You don't want to mess with this brand or that brand, okay? They physically go to the homes of counterfeiters and give them warnings that they need to stop these operations. So it's effective for these sort of like small, maybe more ignorant counterfeiters out there, but it's been extremely effective at getting the word out that brands are watching and monitoring what's happening online, and that they'll come after you. That's a good message. The next Operation Creative, all right, that's an anti-piracy operation. And anti-piracy, or pirated content is exploding. We're having quite a busy year on the piracy side. One of my team members, Claire Miller, who's based in our London office, is almost exclusively working on getting more deeper relationships with content providers and with the platforms of which pirated content, live streaming content is being published and disseminated. So in this initiative, again, by the City of London Police, they take down these pirated websites. But more importantly, they create a block list of sites that have known to be providing illegal pirated content. And they submit these to search engines that will block advertising for these sites. So it'd be much more difficult for folks to even find this kind of content. And that's what we want. We wanted to make it very difficult for people to find illegal content. And a lot of the big advertising agencies in the UK are backing this kind of operation, including the recording industry and the motion picture organizations in the UK. The next one is Operation Chargewell. I'm trying to slow my presentation down because I know we're ahead of time, but There's a lot of details around these operations, but I want to give you a little bit of insight into their effectiveness and their purpose. So in Operation Chargewell, we're attacking the fraudulent transactions themselves and trying to get the money back to consumers, which is really kind of an interesting take, right? You get scammed, you get a counterfeit product. Most times you're sort of out of luck, right? But not if we're going to go through this program. This program is aimed at trying to get people's money back that have been defrauded by counterfeit purchases. So they work, after we're able to identify who the fraudulent seller is and are able to establish the commercial transaction, we work with payment processor, not we, but the London Police, of course, works with payment processors and other organizations to work on getting consumers' money back, which is obviously a great experience for your consumers, right? You know, gee, I didn't know that my brand cared so much that they were trying to get my money back for buying a fraudulent T-shirt or pair of shoes or something like that. The next one is called Operation Ashiko. As I told you, the City of London Police Intellectual Property Crime Unit, they're the boss. They are really on top of this. This is a collaboration with Nominet to suspend.uk websites. So those of you in the domain name industry are familiar with Nominet and .uk. And if they're selling counterfeit goods on a .uk, this operation is specifically targeting that domain name. And since 2013, the operation has suspended over 50,000 websites, including clothing, footwear sites, a lot of fashion brands and items that we have detected on UK sites have been subject to seizure as a result of this law enforcement operation. All right, let's move off of London Police, as good as they are at focusing on the problem that many of us in this room are having. Operation Pangea. Yes, okay. So this was the first law enforcement operation I had ever heard of, even before I came to Mark Monitor. This is taking down illegal rogue online pharmacies, which is a huge consumer health problem. Imagine, elderly populations not getting life-sustaining medicines of the correct dosage, or not even getting the correct ingredient, or enabling young people to obtain illegal opioid products, painkillers, without a prescription. It's a serious health problem. And Pangea aims to reduce the sale and availability of illegal counterfeit pharmacies, online pharmacies. So in the last year, their seizures were up in the tens of millions, with a US value of $14 million. More than 850 arrests of operations, 3,671 websites taken offline, and last year's submission volume we submitted were 392 sites. So for those of you who are our pharma clients in the room, you're probably already familiar with this. We're trying our darndest to make sure that counterfeit medications and pharmaceutical products do not reach consumers. And then a Europol operation, as I said, my favorite name, Aphrodite, which is getting ready to get in full swing fairly soon, actually. So I'll get to the point about how do you find out about when the windows are for submitting these things in just a minute. But this is going to be starting again. It targets, of course, counterfeits on social media and also on websites. So as you already know, social media channels have become the new place to showcase counterfeit goods and products and services, and infringe trademarks and copyrights. So this targets those social media channels. And it uses multiple police agencies across Europe to do this during a specified period of time. So last year they seized 20,000 packages and over 1,000 social media accounts were suspended in the operation last year, which is pretty remarkable. And then, Operation In Our Sights. Again, one that you might have heard of before, removal of counterfeit sites online across European domain names, okay? Last year, more than 20,000 domain names were seized and suspended as a result of this operation. 12 people were arrested. Accounts worth over 1 million euros were seized, and our submission volume last year was 680 sites. So good for the Europeans, but let's give credit also to our domestic partners, right? We heard from the Intellectual Property Resource Center. John McNair, is he still here? No. They actually participate in a lot of these other operations. So one of the points I'm going to emphasize in just a few minutes is that you're not surprised to hear this, that it's jurisdiction-based. You know, the websites have to be either in Europe or targeting Europeans in many cases. But what the IPR Center and the Department of Homeland Security is, they participate also. So if you're in the US and have an issue with a US-based website or carrier or hosting platform, we can go through the IPR Center to participate in these same kinds of operations, including Pangea, Operation In Our Sights, and there's 2 or 3 others that they partner with the London Intellectual Property Crimes Unit to make sure that we get as broad coverage as we can, not just in Europe, but in North America and the United States. So it's not going to come to any surprise that counterfeit goods, these operations are having to focus on a lot of specific regions in the world. A lot of the economies in the world are more highly likely to be the producers and distributors of counterfeit goods and pirated content. These names shouldn't be of any surprise to you. I just put it here to emphasize that even though these law enforcement operations are jurisdictionally based in Europe and North America principally, they can reach to other law partners in different regions of the world. And even though we have no insight into the kinds of relationships that they have with partners in Asia and other places, we're constantly trying to encourage them to work on their global relationship management skills and to try to find and put us in touch with those law enforcement operations and work with them, exchange data so that we can even get a more expanded coverage of the operations globally. Okay, now here's the good stuff, the takeaways, right? How do I participate in an operation that Mark Monitor is a partner of? So, as I mentioned, a lot of these operations go through cycles of activity, right? There's an open window and a closing window date for which to send this information to the law enforcement agencies to get them so that they have the information they need to go to the court system, get the subpoenas, get the warrants, get all of this information they need to do the drug raid, or to do the raids of any kind, counterfeit raids or drug raids. So we have to hit that window. So we try to put out announcements periodically through our normal messaging channels to our clients that says, Operation Aphrodite's coming up from here to here. Again, check with your CSM. That's the best place, that's the most knowledgeable person about when these operations take place. It's our job as the Global Relationship Management team to be on top of those deadlines too, to make sure that everybody knows, okay, if you've got a list of websites that we've been able to determine are counterfeit or rogue pharma or whatever, we can send them in a timely fashion to the law enforcement agencies. You can also contact myself or any member of my team. So as I mentioned, we're the ones that are reaching out to the law enforcement agencies on a regular basis to make sure that our CSMs know exactly what information to provide, when to provide it, so you can always send a note to us and let us know which ones are up and coming. And then working with your CSMs on the right documentation, which I'll mention in just a second. As much as this, this sounds like a great opportunity, and it is, but there are some extra hoops that you might have to go through, which we're trying to streamline, but sometimes it requires affidavits, notarized documents and signatures and stuff like that that you'll need to provide the law enforcement agencies in order for them to know where to look and what to add to their warrants and their subpoenas. So it's really important to follow sort of the instructions of the CSM. And so here are the additional participation tips, okay? Once you're made aware of a window, or once we're able to communicate that, don't wait to the last minute. There is, as I mentioned, there's lots of documentation that might have to go along with the submission of these sites to law enforcement agencies. So in order for us to make that window and process it in time, we'll need your cooperation to do that. The documentation requirements can vary, of course, from the operation to operation. So as I mentioned, you may wish to patients may be required to provide, proper identification, affidavits, some other, validation of your trademark or that sort, or copyrights or pirated content. The other thing I want to mention is because these initiatives are, cyclical and happen during certain times, it's really not. Should be the chief way we go about whacking these moles, but it supplements one of the ways, right? So we're doing enforcement work on your behalf, every single day, right, in some way or another. And we have established processes with a lot of these platforms in order to be able to successfully get compliance. But this is what should be considered in the event you can't get satisfaction through that normal channel, then that's when you flag that particular website, domain, URL, whatever, and load it up for a law enforcement operation. Be aware of the jurisdiction. If your initiative is a Europol initiative, shouldn't be submitting domain names that are outside of Europe, okay? These are just sort of these are basic rules that I just want to give you a little awareness of. But again, our CSMs can, help you walk through the process of what's required. The more information that's supplied is the better. The more information supplied, the better. So we spend a lot of time providing data to law enforcement agencies and helping them understand the kinds of challenges our clients face every day with counterfeit and infringing products, services, and domain names. But some get it, some don't. So it's a constant education of them to know about the scope, the magnitude, and the problem, and how we're dealing with it. So the more information we can provide them, the better. So the more information you can provide to us, the more effective we can be at communicating to that. And here's one of the things the last point is one of the things that we're working on because it's a little frustrating for you, it's certainly frustrating for us. When we participate in these operations, we do all this work, the operation comes to an end, and we get no feedback. We bang on the door of law enforcement. How many sites, did you get? How many of the sites that we submit to you did you go after? Or were you successful? So far, we haven't been able to crack that nut. Reasons? I don't think law enforcement wants to share too much about the success of its operations publicly. I think they believe that a lot of advantage can be gained by, sort of being the stealth enforcement agents that they are, working sort of behind the scenes without tipping their hand to the bad guys. So while we would like to see, some more data from specific to our clients and the operations and the URLs that we submit, we're not able to see that yet. But that's one of the recommendations that my team made just recently to the Department of Homeland Security, who has been tasked by the president to put together a report, which is due next month, on counterfeit trafficking and what can be done to protect brands' online presence. We submitted a list of 7 recommendations to the president for consideration, and one of these was this very point. I think it would be good for law enforcement to provide a little bit more data and insight to those partners that are working with it, so that we can, gauge the relative success or gauge the relative success of these operations that we're participating in. There's a number of other participation opportunities in other law enforcement operations that we're looking at. We'd like to expand our work in, again, places like Asia or India. So the success of these operations really will drive global reach or successive operations in those regions of the world. So we're hoping for that, and that's some of the advocacy work that we do for you and on your behalf. So, as much as I tried to slow that presentation down, I got through it in a timely way, given my 30 minutes. So, do you have any questions? Is there anything you'd like to ask about the operations, or about the Global Relationship Management Team, or about other things that we're working on, or how we can better advocate on your behalf? There's a question over here, if there's a microphone.
My question's 2 parts, really. The first is with Operation Chargewell.
Yep.
How does the London police intend to return those refunds for counterfeit purchases through an escrow or something like that? And the second part of my question, is doesn't that incentivize the purchase of counterfeits by lowering the cost to the consumer?
That's a good question. I hope not. But on the Chargewell, I'll answer the first part of the question. The Chargewell operation is, again, they're trying to make the seller actually pay. So has to be a court order part of that process where the seller is required to actually pay that amount. I don't know whether it goes into an escrow account or not. I know the police don't actually handle the funds themselves. It's a direct transaction between the seller and the defrauded consumer. But I think it's pursuant to whatever the London courts are able to adjudicate. Yes, another question, good. Lengthen the time up here a little bit.
So in one of your tips, you had beware of jurisdiction and not to really submit domain names outside of Europe. But I feel like I need a little bit more definition. Are you talking about, does a domain have to be registered with a European registrar, or does the domain owner have to be a European resident, or what exactly does that mean?
It has to be a website that is or a platform that is hosted in Europe. So it could be with a domain name, a European domain name, a CCTLD. It could be, a social media site that has a presence in Europe, or a marketplace that has a presence in Europe. So it's where the platform is actually located. Great question. Cool. All right, well, we can start our next session, or where's Becky? Charge your glasses. Let's see. I wish I had my music up here with me. DJStatin.rocks. Did you get that? Okay. My kids actually prefer to tell their friends I'm a DJ rather than a brand protection guy. I'm kind of, all right, my dad's a DJ. Oh, really? Your dad's so cool. Yeah. Want me to hit the whoa? And whoa. Okay, that's it. Thank you all very much.